This is Political Radar Pulse with Rhonda Sitnikow, where we explore the issues facing Northeast Wisconsin and beyond with insightful interviews and open discussions.
Hey, all you political junkies, welcome to Political Radar Pulse, the best 30 minutes of unscripted and uncensored political talk you will hear all day. Today I'm joined by former principal of East High School, Howe, and Elmore Elementary Schools, as well as a current member of the Green Bay Area Public School Board, Ed Dorff. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You said that you ran for school board with two main issues in mind: to improve on school safety and to also improve on school climate and staff morale.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, school safety, first of all, has always been a big interest of mine. Even before I was on the school board, obviously, when I was principal at East High School, we had a very scary incident there back in 2006. I imagine you probably remember that if you were around. But even prior to that, as an elementary school principal, there were some issues that we dealt with. I once had a young man, just a second grader, bring a loaded gun into school. Now, he didn't come in with any nefarious purposes. It was just, he was 7 years old and didn't know any better, but still, it was a very scary thing. My interest with safety and security kind of predates that. I have a background that's kind of varied. I was a police officer for 4 years. I was in the Marine Corps. Prior to coming to Green Bay as a principal, I was the education director at Lincoln Hills School in Irma. So that background, I have a degree in criminal justice. All of those things kind of rolled into one overwhelming concern for safety and security in the schools. And of course, with some of the things that have happened, particularly you look at 1999, April of 1999 with Columbine and some of the horrific things that have happened since then, it's an issue that really demands a lot of attention.
Okay, and so that is mentioned as so violence coming into the school and dealing with that, especially with a criminal justice background. You're probably aware of maybe some of the mindset and the psychology of where that comes from.
A lot of that comes from, and that's a very good question, a lot of that comes from the environment that kids are living within. One of the theorists, and I believe it was Erik Erikson, talked about a psychosocial moratorium that people go through if they live in a very chaotic environment. In fact, if they live in a criminally based environment, what happens is their social responsibility, their sense of social responsibility really doesn't develop. It doesn't get beyond where they were when they first experienced that criminal lifestyle. And when I say criminal lifestyle, I'm not suggesting that every kid who is having trouble in school is coming from a criminal background, but think in terms of a chaotic background, think in terms of poverty, think in terms of uncertainty and a lack of structure, that type of a background. You're kind of stuck there until you have specific learning opportunities to develop beyond that. So kids are coming into school with that, and it's not that they don't know right from wrong, it's that these are the things they are experiencing and really don't see a lot different. And those things are reflected in some of the behaviors that we're seeing in schools.
And so let's move right to it. And it's safe to say that it's possible, the recent situation at Washington Middle School with the amount of police calls that information has been put out there that has happened in the past year. Some of that is happening. So what I'm referring to, in case there are people out there that absolutely live in a cave and don't know, because I think you'd have to be, Golden Apple Awarded teacher Kristen Westcott resigned from Washington Middle School recently, citing significant security safety concerns for staff and students. She basically said, it is unsafe to be in this building, was the flavor of that. And based on what you're talking about and looking at the at-risk population of that school, that absolutely makes sense to me. Now, because of that resignation in front of the school board recently, there was a community outrage. There was, a lot of media attention. There was social media activity. And long story short, the community is waiting for a response. And I think it's interesting to note that the administration, the school board, and more importantly, the superintendent of the schools needs to understand that the average person, unless you're a teacher, someone well, that's, they want to share these things, or you're part of the administration and school board, they don't understand that this is the reality in some of the schools. And this is not just within Washington Middle School. Nicolay Elementary has some issues. There are some issues out there in the school district of this flavor. And the community, I believe, what I've witnessed, what I've been told, what I've seen, is that they're waiting for a response to mirror the situation. And I personally don't believe that's happened. Even sitting through the school board meeting last night, I don't believe that's happened. I think the statement from the superintendent, who we look to lead because she's at the top, was very underwhelming. There was a comment that she made to the news station, and I just want to get your thoughts on this because there have been people that have said, what is the situation? She said, "We did take Miss Westcott's concerns very seriously. We just weren't able to express that during the forum of the school board meeting per state open records laws." What is that?
What that refers to is the comments that Kirsten made at that meeting in June, coming to open forum. And while I do believe that most of the people sitting there on the board, administration, what have you, would have loved to have responded and asked questions, we do work within structures that say unless the item is specifically on the agenda, we're not supposed to talk about it during board meetings, and that's part of the open records, open meetings regulations. Even with that, even with those expectations, even with those rules out there, I do believe we could have done a better job just in terms of acknowledging. We can acknowledge, we can ask questions. I knew that Kirsten was coming to the meeting. Kirsten told me that she was coming, so I wasn't surprised to see her there. But
this wasn't really the shock and awe moment that it was portrayed to be like.
Well, not entirely, because everybody on the board and the superintendent did receive that notice or that letter that she sent to me. It's been unfortunately mischaracterized as an anonymous letter. She did not send an anonymous letter. Okay. What happened, Rhonda, is I was away. I was out of town the first week of May. I was out in Ohio. I came home on Friday. I think that would have been Friday the 5th of May, if my date's correct on the calendar, the first Friday in May. And Barb, my wife, said, "Well, you've got a phone call. There's a phone message for you from a teacher at Washington." I said, "Okay, I'll listen to it." Well, I didn't listen to it right away. We went to the grocery store. Lo and behold, who do I run into in the grocery store but Kirsten? And, "Hey, how you doing?" And she said, "Well, I left you a message. I left you a phone message, a voice message." I said, "Oh, it was you." I said, "I didn't listen to it yet. What's up?" And she proceeded to tell me what was up. She basically told me that things are really scary. They're out of control, and I'm looking for some help. And I put all this stuff together, stuff that's happened in the last couple of weeks. She pulled out several pages from a yellow legal pad where she had notes written. I said, "Kirsten, you got to give that to me in writing." I said, "Can you get that to me in writing? So scan it, something." And she said, "I will do that." That was Saturday. I received it on Sunday. She had typed everything up. And I told her at the time, as I would with anybody who confides in me on something, I said, I'll keep your confidence on this. And what I did was I sent, once I got the email from her with all the things listed that you may have seen now because it's been in the media, open records requests and what have you, I immediately sent it to the superintendent and the other school board members. And I said, even if only half of what she's saying is accurate here, which I believe it was all accurate, I said that's totally beyond the pale of what anybody is going to consider acceptable. So when she spoke at the board meeting, no, it wasn't the first time. It wasn't a total surprise to everybody on the board that the types of things that she was talking about were being shared. Some of the things she shared at that meeting were new things because there had things that had transpired between the time she wrote that first note to me and the time she came to the board meeting. Okay,
so then after that happened, and obviously she resigned, and there was a lot of energy out there happening in regard to what to do, how to handle this. It's school year will come, and now what? It looked to be that the district, and correct me if I'm wrong, appeared to put together some parent and community member meetings. Is it CESA 7?
CESA 7, right.
Yeah, so they were able to facilitate that. They came to the meeting last night, the school board meeting, and they relayed some of their findings. One of the number one things, even with community members and parents, is behavior management. So that was something that the district seemed to roll out a document, which apparently you don't like to call it a living document. Can you explain that? Because I get it.
Overused,
But,
trite phrase, I think.
Yeah.
But fact of the matter is, what we're talking about is something that's just not going to sit on a shelf. It's something that has to be exercised with fidelity and has to be reviewed and has to be evaluated.
Yep.
If I were to pull out any document, let's say from even 5 years ago, and say this was our plan 5 years ago, and it hasn't been reviewed, that's not good practice. As a parallel to that, every school district in Wisconsin in 2010 was given a mandate that you must develop what's called an emergency operations plan. And that emergency operations plan includes everything from as scary as active shooters to floods to weather emergencies, what have you, includes some aspects of behavior. The state said at that time that upon the publication of this Act 309 rather, you must have this plan in place within 3 years, of the publication. And the second thing is you must review it every 3 years. So when we look at a behavior plan, if we aren't reviewing it every 3 years minimally, we're not following the state guidelines for our emergency operation plans. So that's another trite phrase, overused phrase is best practice, but it really does fit here. It is best practice that we are reviewing these plans on a regular basis, and you can call it then a living, breathing document because it has to be reviewed.
And so that is, in fact, what seemed to be on the table last night. The multi-level system of support for behavior. I heard some rumblings in the audience and my own thoughts on this. It's an evidence-based decision, basically, to address behaviors. They seem to roll it out and talk about it, but I mean, again, you are more of an expert on this. How different is that compared to what has been done, let's just say last year when this was happening at Washington? Is in especially with some comments made from the superintendent, it feels like this is the same thing really, but we really mean it this time.
I understand that concern that way, but there are a couple things with
Are you
this.
satisfied with what's out there?
Am I satisfied with this current document that we have? Yeah, I think it's very good.
Okay.
I think it's good. And I'm going to qualify that. It's good as long as it is implemented and exercised with fidelity. And you were at the meeting last night and you heard the questions I asked, one of which was, how is this going to be evaluated? How is it going to be assessed? What assurances do we have? Because we saw in the rollout plan that there is a calendar. And we know that on August 3rd, all the school principals, all the administrators got to see it, had an overview of it, I don't know how long it took because I wasn't at that meeting, but basically had an introduction and were introduced to it and went through it. And I assume that they spent a lot of time on it and had questions. Well, within that rollout plan, when the teachers come back towards the end of August, there's a date range in there. And my question was, within that date range, what is the plan? How do we know that within 41 schools that all the principals are indeed delivering that plan to staff? And then the second thing, and this is something that I think they still have to work on because Vicki Beyer, who I think highly of, said, well, that's something we have to follow up on, is how do we know that the staff who are being introduced to this plan, who are being taught this plan, so to speak, truly understand it? Are we assessing their understanding? And that's something we haven't done. And we've talked...
So wait, back up.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been plans laid out, but there's no mechanism in place to measure the fidelity.
True. There haven't been in the past.
How is that possible?
I think there's an assumption. There has been an assumption that, and I think it's a fair assumption for the most part, that we put something out there and we spend time with people and they would exercise it with fidelity. But it's no different than, well, yeah, it is different actually, because when I'm thinking about curriculum things, we implement a new math curriculum, new language arts curriculum. How do we know whether or not the teachers have really understood what it is? Well, we understand that by the results that we see with student learning. And I suppose it could be fairly said that we would understand whether or not the teachers understand the behavior plan by the results of student learning. I don't want to wait for that. I mean, certainly we have to look at that. That data is important. But I want to know before they even start working with students that they clearly understand it, that they've had an opportunity to ask questions and have those questions.
As a Green Bay parent, it was not warm and fuzzy to sit and have someone ask them, how do you measure fidelity? And they couldn't answer that. That didn't feel very good.
So I'm not warm and fuzzy? Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, the presenters of the plan, there was really, they didn't look to be confident they knew themselves.
And I think that is because it's, for the most part, it is new ground.
Okay.
And I did raise that point at a previous meeting that we have done these sorts of things in the past where we have delivered something, said we want you to implement this. Here's a new plan. It's going to be implemented. Here's the implementation plan. But have we truly assessed whether folks understand it before it gets implemented?
And implement it. And you made a point about principals having to do that. What does that look like when a principal isn't accountable? And how do you plan to make them accountable? Because there are other issues in the Green Bay School District. Well, I think there are some principals that are not being accountable. What does that look like when a principal is held accountable to this plan that is so desperately needed?
One of the things that is different about this plan and the implementation going forth are going to be the checks that central administration must do with each building principal. And when I say that, what the board has been assured of is that once a month, the principal supervisor, the executive director of whichever level, be it elementary or secondary, will be meeting with the principal to go over their behavioral data. And I'm glad to hear that.
Now, is that different? That's different than what was not happening in the past.
Well, I can tell you that there was a similar type of approach prior to at least a couple of years ago. And it wasn't done specifically with the principals, but I know it was done with the associate principals. Therefore, it was a secondary-based procedure because until recently, we didn't have associate principals at the elementary level. So what had been done in the past was this. During the associate principal meetings, the executive director for student services would go over behavioral data with the associate principals at their meetings and talk about trends, talk about supports that might be needed. Here it's going to be one-on-one. This is my understanding of it anyway, Rhonda, that the executive directors will meet one-on-one with the principals. So you're my supervisor, I'm the principal at such and such high school. Sometime during the month, you're coming over, I'm coming down to you, and we're saying, Ed, let's look at these data. What are you seeing here? What are the trends? What do you need? How does this compare to last month? How does this compare to last year? Having conversations. And then if we're seeing that there are some areas that need to be addressed, by golly, they need to be addressed then and there, and not waiting until, God forbid, May 7th of next year. And
so let's talk about that, because I think that's another point that the community has made. Why did it take so long? What is the problem there? I mean, when you look at it from the outside, and frankly from somewhat on the inside as well, it looks to be that there's a fear of reporting that. There's a fear that there will either of retribution or that nothing will happen.
Okay.
Because that's a lot to hold under yourself for so long at a job that you go to every day, and then all of a sudden I'm done.
There's a couple of things from my perspective that address that, Rhonda. First of all, how could there be that much, and how could it get that out of control? Everyone knows that there has been a lot of turnover in terms of principals at Washington Middle School for whatever reason. Fact of the matter is, when you have that kind of turnover, things get lost in the process. And it's not an excuse, that's a reality. At the district level, there have been a number of reorganizations, restructurings. Every time one of those things happen, something gets lost in the process. I think what happened at Washington is with the fact that there were...
How do you lose all that, though? That's a lot to lose. I mean, with all due respect, that's a lot to lose. That's a lot of heavy-duty information that's just... How do you lose that?
I don't have a good answer for you on that one. I mean, but I know that it does happen.
Yeah.
I know that it does happen. And the best I can offer with that is every new person coming in has their own particular biases, their own particular plans, their own particular goals and visions. And something that maybe 2 principals ago was really, really important and they really were working on it might not have been a priority for the next principal or the principal after that, or some other priority seems to have risen to the top, coming from central office or coming from the state, what have you. And some of the day-to-day issues, for not necessarily evil reasons, but they just get overlooked. Now, how do you overlook those kinds of behaviors? And that's, you can't. You really can't. As far as concerns about retaliation and people coming forward.
Because I want to say, and I'm going to say this, and I'm sure a lot of people know, the teachers in the Green Bay Public School District were told, and to some degree threatened, that they could not make comments on social media.
Yeah.
And that's a fact.
Yep.
I had quite a few teacher friends, clients of mine tell me that, and they're frustrated with that because it's interesting. This is a very intense situation in our community, one that a lot of people will remember as well, and especially those parents that are going to be sending their students to the school in 30 days, and the teachers are being gagged. There's somewhat of a business as usual approach to change. And we need some leadership. We do.
That, I know what you're referring to with that. It was in the staff scoop that came out in July. And it was truly what it was a boilerplate statement, something that had been developed 2011, I think, is when it first came out. Now, I'm not going to make excuses for it and the timing and what it said to people. What I can tell you is this. That is going to be addressed. The concerns that people have about retaliation and about coming forward, those concerns are going to be addressed. I think I may have mentioned to you that I am asking that the board develop and adopt policy on staff protection. I'm also asking that we revise and put into policy what falls under the concept of grievances. And when I say grievances, I think I may have mentioned it last night at the board meeting. Traditionally, we think about things that go against union contracts, but currently in our staff handbook, grievance covers discipline, it covers termination, and it covers workplace safety. Mm-hmm. And it's that workplace safety that I want to bring up, revise, and make sure that the staff knows that the board is not going to tolerate any type of retaliation should they come forward with concerns, should they express concerns in a public forum. The only caveats that we have on that are reasonably that, don't break confidentiality. Don't be talking about individual kids and naming individual kids, things that are covered by law. But the idea that staff shouldn't be allowed or shouldn't be encouraged to bring forward concerns, we've got to get rid of that.
Where did that come from? Where was that directive from?
Oh, there's a history of that. I think that previous administrations may have done and said some things that still carry over to this day.
But you said it was in a staff scoop. Where literally, whom send? Where did that come from?
The one in July, the one that we just had?
Yes.
I believe it came from the Public Information Office. So,
Okay.
that would be,
Who would that be?
That'd be Lori Blakesley.
Okay. So it's coming from downtown. So would it be safe to say it's coming from the superintendent?
Ultimately, I believe everything that comes out, just as anything that came out of my school when I was a principal was my responsibility, anything that comes out is ultimately the superintendent's responsibility. And certainly to a degree, school board responsibility as well, because in the end, the superintendent is an employee of the school district, answerable to the school board, who is answerable to the people who have elected us. So,
Well, and it's a mixed message, right? We want teachers to feel, in this plan to move forward and improve on the situation in the school system. We want them to feel that they can go to people for support. We want to feel that they can do that. We want to make them feel that, honestly, that their feelings are legitimized. That doesn't help, that message.
It doesn't. And I think we can, I believe we can, as long as we do follow through, and I believe the intent to follow through is there, get the message to teachers that however it happened in the past, that's not where we want to be. Where we want to be, where we need to be, is have open communication, however that looks. And if that open communication, you want to say that I think Ed Dorff as a school board member is the worst thing I've ever seen, I want that to be considered protected, privileged speech. If on the other hand, I say that, his grandchildren, well then,
right.
Well, we're not going to violate the confidentiality. We're not going to talk badly about students. We're not going to break the rules around personnel issues, those kinds of things, that can't be.
I want to ask you, we're running out of time, but there's two places I want to go. I know, it went so fast. Do you know anything about principals being directed by the district to refuse transfers of teachers from Washington Middle School? Is that true?
I don't know. I don't think so. The last thing I heard was, and this is just this past weekend, a staff member had communicated to me about some teachers wanting to transfer, that anything that had been out there about limitations on transfers out had been lifted. Now, that's nothing new, limitations on transfers out, because there is an interest in maintaining continuity in a school. And I don't care if it's Washington, if it's Elmore, if it's McAuliffe, you've got a cadre of teachers, and you want to try to keep things as solid as you can, I'm missing a word here, but you want to keep that continuity and try not to have mass exodus if at all possible. That might be what you're referring to. Okay. And again, that's been a practice that's been around for 20 years.
So speaking of somewhat of a max exodus, there's 14 open positions, and we have a month to go. Are you concerned? 14 open positions at Washington Middle School.
Yeah, I know that today they are holding what they're terming a job fair at Washington Middle School, and I heard that at last count there were 17 or 18 people who had expressed interest in going there. It's always a concern. One of the things that we found out last night at the board meeting was that there are currently, or as of last night anyway, there were 49 open classroom positions across the district, which compared to last year at this time was very, very close, very, very close in terms of numbers. So yeah, it's a concern. It's always a concern when you have those kinds of numbers, but some of those were retirements, certainly. Some of them were transfers, some, out and out resignations. Some of them are the positions that are being hired.
So wait a second. Were there other teachers that resigned from Washington Middle School aside from Kristen?
I'm only aware of one, and it was really kind of I don't know how many.
Okay.
If there were,
she was not the lone resignation.
I know of only one other one.
Okay.
And there may have been more. I just don't know.
Okay.
So I have to,
that's an interesting point. That's the truth.
Well, and you have to ask and do follow up on why people are resigning. There's a lot of reasons why people do resign.
Sure.
It's one of the things that I've asked the Human Resources Department to do as people resign, is to do exit interviews and come back to the school board and say, tell us why people are leaving. Sometimes people are leaving because it's a family move. Sometimes it's, hey, I can make a better deal in another district, and that happens quite frequently. So there's a lot of reasons, and it would be helpful to know what those reasons are, so there's not just, they're leaving because,
So these aren't actually happening right now, these exit interviews?
I don't know to what degree. They are happening. Yes, they are happening.
Okay.
I don't know to what degree.
Okay.
I don't know if everybody who is leaving, I think everybody who is leaving is offered that opportunity.
Sure, you can't force it.
But I'd like it more than just an offer. I'd like to be somewhat assertive about that, and just rather than send you an email saying, would you like it, pick up the phone and say, hey, Rhonda, I really need this information.
Right.
Please help me out.
Yeah, so we can improve upon
Yeah,
what we're
absolutely.
doing.
Yeah.
Okay, and last questions. Some people say that there seems to be an incestuous environment between school board and district administration. When I say that, I don't mean sexually. I mean some of the relationships may be a little bit too cozy in order to make really hard decisions that involve outside influence. I actually heard a lot about that in the last few weeks. Do you think there's anything to that? Do you think it's the ability to make those decisions and not to be fair and whatnot, but yet sometimes you're doing things that I would like to assume that people aren't elected to make friends. They're elected to do the right thing. And it's a little questionable right now.
I understand, and I've gotten some communications around that as well. More than one person has communicated with me their concern that we didn't elect you to be friends with the administration, and what I said earlier on, the administration are employees, we are elected, and I agree with that concept. That doesn't mean it has to be adversarial. I don't think adversarial is
No.
necessary. But I do think there needs to be a clear
needs
demarcation.
To be some boundaries, right?
Boundaries, excellent. Yeah, there need to be. It needs to be clearly understood that the school board are the elected representatives of the community and are responsible to the community and aren't there to be, as one person said, you're not there to be the, they put the backup singers or something along those lines for administration. That's not exactly it, but it was that thought.
You're there for leadership. That's what you're in office for, I believe, is to really take into consideration everything and make those hard decisions.
Here's what I was told when I came onto the school board, Rhonda. The school board is not there to manage the school district. That's why you hire administrators. The school board is there to govern, to provide governance. My contention has been right along that you cannot provide effective governance if you don't know what's going on. If you are relying just on administration, it's not a slam on administration, but if you're just relying on administration to provide you all the information, we need, when I say we, I'm talking about school board members, we need to be in the schools, we need to be talking to people in the schools, we need to be talking to the students, to the teachers, to the principals, we need to be talking to the central office administrators, and we need to be hearing from the people in the community, whether they have children in school or not. Because ultimately, once again, that's who we're responsible to. And I think we can provide more effective governance if we are getting out there and hearing what people have to say, and not just relying on the input from the administration. And again, that's not a slam on administration, but we need more of a 360 approach.
There is one thing I will address before we go. There is a petition out there that is calling for the superintendent to be removed.
Yes.
And that is something that, there's a lot of strong feelings associated with that. How do you measure the success and progress of a superintendent? I mean, if one was to look at the situation in the Green Bay schools right now, that doesn't look very pretty.
Well, I don't think that one measure is appropriate. And the impetus for this petition, I believe, was the situation at Washington. That was the catalyst for it. And I don't think that the superintendent or school board should be evaluated solely on that. But if you look at what are the conditions that led to it, what are some other conditions around that, I think those are the things you have to examine. And as I read that petition, there were a number of issues that it raised. It wasn't just, I think the first thing it said was, well, there are 7 principals in 6 years. Yeah, okay. If you left it at that, you can't blame that on the superintendent solely. That's not, blame if that's even the right word. But there were other issues that were raised and other issues that came to our attention from communications, either by email, phone calls, U.S. mail, that all the board members have received. And what our position right now is this. We have not received that petition officially. We know it's out there. We know what those issues are. We are continuing, and we will look at all of those things on their merits. So it's not being dismissed out of hand, but those issues are going to be addressed. So,
well, Well, I'm
I
thinking
don't know if I'm answering the question.
No, you are.
Okay.
You are. It's interesting. If you look at, I don't know, I would be interested and I would wonder about some sort of anonymous teacher survey. Can you measure a superintendent in that way?
The district has done, excuse me, frog in my throat there. I get frog in the water you give me there. So I see a tadpole.
Yeah.
For 2 years now, we have done, when I say the district has done culture and climate surveys in the schools. And the schools are measured, the principals, the responses about what's happening in each school, the downtown departments, there's responses about the downtown departments, and that is all anonymous. So those surveys are out there.
Are they public?
The results, the numerical data, yes, they are public.
They are. And where can someone find those?
I would just call the district office and ask. Call Lori Blakesley's office, call the superintendent's office.
And they would have them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there anything else you want to add
In fact,
to wrap
I should
up?
tell you, we've discussed them at board meetings already, and looked at the raw data and the.
What does the raw data tell you right now in the environment, in the Green Bay School District environment, with regards to the district administration and the superintendent?
I think what I've seen is that the data on the people who did answer the survey, and I think there was a pretty good response to the survey, the majority of the people seemed satisfied. Now, when I say the majority, is that, you might say 70%, well, that's still 30% saying something else. You have to...
And we're talking about teachers right now.
Well, it's...
Who are we talking about?
Well, I'm talking overall, but you can break it down. Teachers, you can take what the survey does is ask people to identify what their role is. They ask them to identify their role and to identify how many years of experience they have, whether they're elementary, secondary, whether they're special area. So all those data can be broken down, and you can look at that. You can say, what do the elementary teachers say about the transportation department, for example? What do the secondary teachers say about central office, and you get numerical data. What aren't public are the comments, because those things identify a lot of things. But the charge to administration from the school board was this: you go through those comments, and when you are finding things that are concerning, when you're finding trends, you need to address that. They need to be addressed, and there's a level of trust that those things are going to happen.
Accountability, that is something that we can't have enough of that right now.
I agree with you.
And I truly, in closing the show, I truly can extend my wish to you and the rest of the school board, superintendent, and the district administration that this looks great on paper, but time will tell if it's actually being implemented. And the community we need this right now. The public school, and especially myself, I support public schools. I've marched in Madison for public schools.
Thank you.
It was very cold and I actually had pneumonia, but I went.
Well, that was foolish.
I know it was, but this is not a time. There couldn't be a worse time to have so much scrutiny. But it's painful for those of us who actually really do support public schools, that have our kids in public schools, and yet are really struggling with, some of the robotic sense of business as usual. I look forward to that changing, and I look forward to leaders who are brave enough to do that. We need that.
I hear you. I agree, and I'm hopeful that you're going to see that evolve. As regards the behavior plan, it will be monitored. It will be adjusted. And when I say it will be, I'm talking about the commitment of administration, the commitment of the principals to do that, and commitment of the school board to follow up on it. It has to be done. And the other thing you said, and I want to reflect on that as well, as far as it couldn't be a worse time, you're right. Public education has been getting assailed left and right for several years, and that's not okay. It's just not okay. One of the things that I think is really, really important as I kind of close out my comments here is this. In a very, very few days, in just a couple of weeks, there will be 22,000 kids who will be coming into the schools. September 5th, first day of school, and right now, the teachers, regardless of the school, the teachers, the administrators in the building, the administrators at central office here need to get ready. They need to have the best possible opening they can have. And while I don't want people to hold off and not question things, I want them to keep that in mind as well and give people a little bit of space and room right now to get the school year off to a good start.
Are the teachers
Don't
going to
stop
hear
holding
from
their
you,
feet to
though?
the fire. Pardon me?
Are the teachers going to hear from the school board or at least by you on this?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are. And this is a great vehicle. The fact that we in the school board have committed to being more present, which, by the way, is something that came out of that survey that I mentioned from the teachers. Teachers saying, well, I don't even know who the school board is. I don't know what they do. We never see them around. We'd like to see them in the buildings. We want to be in the buildings, and the principals have been told that. The school board wants to be there, not just for the bake sales, not just for the concerts. Invite us in for meetings. Invite us in for, some of the day-to-day stuff. Even my son, and Ned, he's invited me into his classroom to help him build stuff and, get my hands dirty, and that's great. We need to get in there and get our hands dirty with that. So,
well, then you have a sense of reality of what's happening and what they're experiencing, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time and look forward to some change.
So do I.
That wraps up Political Radar Pulse episode 19. For show notes, go to politicalradarpulse.com/19. If you are watching this episode on YouTube, like, subscribe, and do not forget to hit the bell for notifications. If you would like to support the show, you can like the show on Facebook and Twitter, and you can buy shirts and other merchandise at politicalradar.com/shop. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for watching Political Radar Pulse. To ensure that you'll never miss an episode, subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. To check out more episodes of Political Radar Pulse, visit politicalradarpulse.com or connect with us on Facebook or Twitter.